Sarah, are you on a Mac?
Yeah.
That's why.
All right. It is recording.
Okay, so for question one, it asks, what are your thoughts from Dr. Wilson's discussion on relationships? So my takeaway from this, I really liked his focus on unconditional positive regard. And the framework that he used for that was that we show unconditional empathy and patience to all of those in our program, regardless of the perception of their success. So if we have little Timmy and little Steve, and it looks like Steve is going to end up being a lot more successful in life than Timmy, we don't treat them any differently based on the perception of their success, because we need to go in and understand that any type of work we can do with these kids, any unconditional empathy and patience we can show them, will help them be a better version of themselves, regardless of what they end up being. He used an example of working at a sports event and a dad yelling at his daughter and him having to stop and be like, is this really the impression you want to have on everyone here and on your daughter? Because the unconditional patience you can show a child lets them have the ability to grow and learn. So that was my takeaway. I focused mostly on the unconditional positive regard.
I relate that to my work. Again, I work in a residential behavioral health facility. So it's kind of like meet them where they're at. Like, not every kid is going to be at the same ability of like learning, understanding, like physical ability level. So kind of meeting them where they're at and being okay with wherever they're at, and kind of the radical acceptance part of that as well. Yeah, that's what I got. With really a lot of moments dinged in my head from work.
I really liked that he mentioned kind of like your work relationships is you may not be friends with every single person you work with. That doesn't mean you have to have a bad relationship with that person, and you can respect each other. But instead of just demanding respect by everyone that you work with, more compelling them to respect you. And I thought that was really important. Like everyone, I'm sure we work with somebody that we don't really care for, but I'm sure there's still some positive relationship that you can build with that person.
I agree. Yeah, I kind of picked up on the same things that y'all have already mentioned, but specifically the relationships. I think just in general, what I found from it was like he talked about the work relationships, and I just realized, like, and not specifically just in work, but in any situation, like in your friend group or in a class or in a group like this, there may be somebody who you don't necessarily relate to on that personal level, but that doesn't mean that you're not able to get something from interacting with that person that you hadn't understood or maybe valued before. And I think that's really important and something that I personally don't always consider. And I kind of just get in my head thinking, I don't like this person. I don't have to listen to what they have to say. And I don't think that that's the healthiest way to go about it, for sure, because there's always something that you can learn from those situations.
Moving on to question two. In week 5, the article 3 huge mistakes we make leading kids and how to correct them. Um, the rest of the question. I really agree with Elmar's approach in this article. My husband and I spoke a lot about these ideas before we had kids, and we both kind of listened to Jordan Peterson, who he talks a lot about how we as parents can like instill fear into our children unintentionally because we're trying to feel like, oh, don't do that. You're gonna fall. You're gonna fall. You're gonna get hurt. And we try to save a lot instead of letting them fall and get hurt, so then they can learn. Um, I really feel like we do need to let our students and children fail. Um, I've noticed in my own students, I teach high schoolers, that if I give them something that they can't Google, like, if you Google like how tall is Michael Jordan, it's just gonna like pop up 6, whatever. If that doesn't give them the answer, they can't find it. They're not gonna click on a website and read to find an answer. So I noticed they get really, really frustrated with that. And so I intentionally set up my projects to be ambiguous, where they have to read websites and find stuff so that they know how to do that. They don't like failure at all, which none of us do, but I think it's important for them to learn how to fail so that we can support them.
That's awesome. And I also agree with that wholeheartedly. Also like teaching kids how to advocate for themselves as well. It's kind of like the thing about if you bring a lot of attention when a kid falls, then they're gonna cry. But if you like, all right, you can do it, you can get up, then like they'll get up and they won't cry, unless they're super hurt. But also like advocating for themselves if they are in a moment of distress and you're like, you're okay. They're like, I'm actually not okay. I need something right now. I need help. I need you to do this for me. And that's what I took away as well. It's
I agree wholeheartedly with number 1 and number 2. Number 3, I think I might have a little bit of a unique perspective on, but number 1 and number 2, especially relating back to the readings, it talked about how 70% of children will grow resilience in their context, that there are some one-offs where kids won't become resilient, but that kids grow resilience to their context, and then because of that become stronger for it. I agree/disagree that we rave too easily, as the third of the 3 that she mentioned. I think that parents do rave too easily. I think that other adult relationships might not rave enough, because it talked about in the chapter reading for week 5 about how important it was to have those intentional relationships with adults besides your parents. And most of those relationships for me as a youth were sports related. And, at least from a male athlete perspective, I didn't get praise when I did well. It was just expected that I would. And that was a little disheartening, to be, I would see my female counterparts do better than they did last week, and like kudos, and everyone would jump all over and be super happy. And I would win a race and, be walking off with the gold. And everyone's like, oh, yep, that's what you were supposed to do. And I was like, oh, well. And of course, my parents would be like, yeah, but they're your parents. It talks about in the reading as well that it doesn't mean as much when it comes from your parents. So I think that maybe our parents might rave a little bit too much, but in a small context of male youth sports, I don't think other adults rave enough about youth.
That's a good point. I focused on that same spot where when we rave too easily. And then I really was drawn to the part that said kids eventually learn to cheat, exaggerate, and lie to avoid difficult reality. And I think that's something that's become especially prevalent now. It seems like, because people just I've even experienced this in other college classes that I had done. People would come up with lies. Oh, I have food poisoning, so they would get out of labs because they just didn't want to go that day, or they were hungover or something. They had some reason that they couldn't be there, but instead of being accountable for what they had decided to do, they made up a lie so that way they would still get the opportunity to do that at a later date. And then I kind of, in a similar way, I guess, to the male in sports thing, I think it's interesting, at least in my own personal experience, when you look at parents. I'm an older child, so my little brother did not have the same expectations as I did, and I don't know if it's actually because my parents just didn't care as much as he grew up, or it was just the different expectations that were set for us as we grew. So I always had all A's, and I did track, and I did extracurricular activities and all this stuff. And my brother, it was if he got on A, B on a roll, it was a really big deal. And so I think it's just interesting how those different relationships between parents and children are established, and they have, and I understand there's different expectations based on your own capabilities, but I think it's just interesting how that kind of works out, and how you as the other child in that situation kind of perceive those instances.
That's
definitely
interesting. Wow.
Okay, number 3 is developmental framework, appropriate structure, trained staff, and supportive relationships are linked to what type of environments for youth development. And in the components of camp experiences for positive youth development article, it talks about that they must be evident in youth programs that provide positive youth development outcomes. One of these things on this list in my head really jumps out. It's the trained staff part. I'm just gonna go off of where I work again. Some of these people are lowest age that we hire is 21 and up. 21 and up. And some of these people have bachelor's degree in psychology and social work. This is the field that they want to work in, and some of these people are just here for a check, and I don't know how, because they don't get paid a lot at all, but it is a job. So the trained staff part, it also goes both ways of do you want to be trained? Do you actually care about what you're doing enough to learn something that could benefit what you're doing, or are you just here for a check? So that really jumped off of the list for me, in my brain at least. Yeah.
The one that stood out the most to me was opportunities for skill building, because it's great and all to have a program, but if the kids don't glean anything from it by the end of the program as far as actual capability wise, then a lot of the reasons we've talked about are transitioning from youth to adultship, and a lot of those have to do with skills. So if you went to a summer camp every year and you had a great time but you didn't learn anything, it's development, but I wouldn't say it's positive youth development, because you're not gaining anything attainable. I think a good example is Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and I wasn't privy to this. I didn't get to participate, but I have a roommate who did Boy Scouts, and he still knows, when we go hunting, how to tie the knots, how to put down the tent. Like those are skills that he has, and skills that transition to leadership as well. You've got those tangible, trackable skills like building a tent, and then how to manage people if you were assigned to tell the rest of the group to build a tent. So I think opportunities for skill building are very vital, especially with our society switching a lot more towards just like pleasure camps, like just do what you want and go have fun and just get the kids out of the house.
I really agree with Grace about the trained staff component. Sorry. Growing up, I was involved in like summer camps and stuff, and I was always surprised about the training that went into being just a camp counselor, because when you're a camper, you think they're just college kids hired to have fun and hang out with you. But there's actually like training that goes into it. And I really appreciated that they talked to us like how to have hard conversations with campers, because the likelihood of a camper telling you something about something going on at home is like high, unfortunately. And one of the biggest things I took away from that is being able to control your facial expressions, right? So somebody telling you something heartbreaking and stuff, and you're not going, "Oh my God," right? Because that could cause this child to like shut down. And that's something that I've taken into my career now. And I feel like I can really bond with my students, and I feel like they can open up to me because I'm not overly reactive when they're telling me the hard stuff. And I just think training your staff is highly important, no matter where you work, but especially in youth development situations.
The one that I really was drawn to in this specific reading was the supportive relationships. And I kind of thought back to our human connection CRF that we did. And one of the things that I discussed in that was like how my relationship with my grandma was so important to me, because even though she had a bunch of different grandchildren, she still made me feel like I was the most important person in the room. And I think that connection and being able to share certain things with her that I felt like it was just our thing that we did together really helped me to grow as a person, and learn a bunch of different skills. Like she was the one who taught me how to sew. I used to go up there and help her with Christmas presents, so she taught me how to wrap Christmas presents. Like just little things like that. I think being in a situation where I feel like I was being recognized really helped me to maybe want to succeed more in that instance. And so that was what I was really drawn from this.
Nice.
Okay, question 4 is, what are some of the threats posed to youth programs in relation to maintaining a group of staff for multiple years? So in our reading, I looked at the conclusion, and the one thing that I thought really was a good point to focus on was it says youth development principles and practices are too often not considered in staff training and professional preparation for recreation workers. And I thought that was really interesting, because it is very true that when you think about those youth development principles and practices, that it's not something that's really emphasized. It's just assumed that you would know how to do those things. And so there are certain ways or like certain practices that maybe you need to be more sensitive about this, but you're not aware of it just because it wasn't really emphasized in your training. Instead, they wanted you to focus on how you were going to get more participants to come or something like that. And then I also thought it was interesting that they discuss how this wasn't in this reading, it was in a different reading, but I thought it was interesting. They talked about how youth development like to work in those programs and it's like an intrinsic want to help those people, but that they generally leave because of the lack of opportunity for advancement. And that is very true. I want to work in extension, but I would prefer to be in a specialist position. And those are very hard to come by. And typically, once somebody is in one of those positions, they stay there for the remainder of their career. So it's really hard for you to stay motivated over the years to where you get to the point that you have the opportunity to get that position when you could be somewhere else making more money, doing something that you maybe didn't find as rewarding, but maybe was more beneficial in terms of the financial aspect of it.
Mhm. Mhm. Going back to what you first said about there's emphasis on this, but not on this. And it's a lot of time it's like emphasis on what you need and not what like the clients need, right? It's like you need to be CPR certified. You need to be like here we have restraint training that everyone needs to go through. And like I'm a lifeguard, so everyone on my team needs to be a lifeguard. So like these are the things that we need like as people to make it safe and to make it like if we get audited, we won't get in trouble, right? But what do we need to show up for the clients? What do we need? So there's a lot of emphasis on some things and less on other things. And I do think that that's definitely part of why it's inconsistent.
I highlighted when the reading on camp specifically talked about the struggle of the seasonality of a lot of youth program jobs, that it is incredibly hard to maintain staff because, I mean, it sounds like most of us have volunteered at something at some point, but we're not still doing it full time. Like it was a one-off summer or summers while we were in high school or summers while we were in undergrad, and that they have to put so much money and resources into training just for a summer. And then you're not even guaranteed those people will come back. And so it's difficult because there was a quote in there that it said something about that they rely on the seasonal workers to supplement their workforce, but they can't run it without it. But it's just a conundrum of how do we make sure they're properly trained and how do we incentivize them to want to come back so we don't have to retrain them.
I focused a lot about the pay, and not even thinking about like myself as a teacher or extension agent. I feel like we're all underpaid in everything we do, but more specifically, people who do work in camps. Unfortunately, in my experience, I feel like some of the best people to be working with youth have to leave because they just don't make enough, right? And unfortunately, it's like in order to pay them more, you have to increase costs somewhere. And so if you're increasing price for camp, then you're maybe limiting the exposure, right? Some kids might not be able to afford it. So it's kind of one of those things. It's how do we reach as many kids as possible, but also make a like living wage. And unfortunately, you don't want these awesome people just to make a living wage, right? You want them to be able to do stuff. So I agree, the seasonality of it is hard. And I know I worked in camps where they really tried to, you'd have people work there for 5 years in a row, which was awesome, but they're still making cents on the hour, which is not livable for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So question 5 was a bonus question, so we can go through this one pretty quick, but it says, human connection submission. Did you reach out to the people you wrote about? I did. I reached out to, one was my cross country coach / math teacher, and one was my art teacher. Cross country coach, I've stayed in pretty constant contact with, so she wasn't surprised that I wrote about, she was flattered, but not surprised. The art teacher, I had not talked to in 8 years. And she was like, I mean, I had to go find her. I was like, I'm sure I have her email somewhere. And she was really touched that it's cool in retrospect because I, think about her all the time. She had a huge impact on my life. She had no idea until I sent her that submission that I was anything but just a student in her class,
Interesting.
Anybody else reach out to their peeps?
I
Um,
wouldn't reach out to either of my people because they are not alive.
oh, you didn't do a seance or anything like?
Pull out my Ouija board. Told them all about it.
I did not reach out to mine, but I happened, okay, so I did the CRF wrong on accident because I didn't read all the instructions. So when I went to turn it in, I saw what we're actually supposed to do. And weirdly enough, I had ran into my ag teacher that day. And I was like, oh, well, that's great because he was who I was going to write about anyways. And I see him a few times a year and he knows. And I try to tell him and his wife, like, they are role models. And I don't know, just try to keep touch base with them. And I'll call him pretty often and ask his advice and stuff.
Nice.
I did not reach out to my people. One of them was my grandmother, and she's passed away. And my other one was my ag teacher from my sophomore year, because I had 4 different ag teachers all 4 years of high school. The last time I talked to him was probably freshman year of college. We were gonna go have dinner, but then his daughter ended up getting sick, so I haven't seen him or talked to him, which is really sad because he had a big impact on all of my involvement in the FFA, but I am Facebook friends with him, so I do keep up with him that way.
All right. Question 6. What does it mean for a youth worker to be professional? Do youth workers generally rely on intrinsic or extrinsic motivators to stay in this field? So I feel like a professional in their field means, or in this field specifically, means that they can connect to a variety of people, from like youth of different backgrounds, to their parents, to community members, all while also maintaining their program. So you're doing a lot of outreach and stuff, and also being able to advocate and promote for their programs to ensure that the community members understand the importance of having these youth programs in their communities. I feel like these people typically have to be like well-spoken, but also just positive. And then I also truly believe that people who work with youth outside of the formal education system, because there are a lot of teachers I feel like that don't do it for intrinsic reasons. But besides that, I feel like a lot of people are doing it because they want to improve the lives of the students. And they're not just there for a paycheck, or youth, I should say.
So my definition of a youth worker in a professional sense was from the reading that we did. It says that youth workers are encompassing the responsibilities such as trust, loyalty, and confidentiality. And I think those really are the biggest 3 that you kind of expect from a youth worker, but those are some that are maybe harder to convey to the youth that you're working with, because you really have to get to know those people and make them feel like they're valued in order for them to be able to offer you that trust and loyalty from those individuals. And then in regard to the intrinsic factor part, I thought this quote was really interesting that said, passion brings people to youth work, but it takes more than passion to keep them there. And so that really resonated with me, because I know that in a lot of the time somebody will come do something and they'll be so passionate because they'll have all of these ideas of things that they want to accomplish, and there's so much red tape or other people in their organization that kind of just prevent them from accomplishing those goals, and it really makes them feel discouraged. And then on top of that, you feel like you're not maybe being recognized as much as you deserve to in that field, just because I feel like it's such a thankless job most of the time. And so it makes it really difficult for those individuals to want to continue on without getting that recognition.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry. I agree with the 3 things that you said from the article. And also that that relates to like rapport building with, at least my clients, at least we start with like an assessment, and it's very like technical questions, and it can be super scary, but then you like to a new kid that's like never been in a hospital setting before, that's really scary. It's like, why are you here? No, they don't want to talk about that the first day, right? So you have to build rapport first, and that trust, loyalty, and confidentiality, so they do open up to you. And I'm a recreation therapist, so like we're the fun ones. So they do open up to us more. And it's a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes they just really just dump on us, and it's like we're trying to do this whole group activity, and it's this one kid that's really struggling, and you know them, you know why they're here, you know what they need, but it's really hard to go one-on-one then when you're in a group. And so like that's hard to juggle. And then the intrinsic and extrinsic, as an extrovert, it's really hard. Like I can, like, I'm doing this for me, but I'm also not doing this for me at all, right? And like I'm using my energy. I could never sit at a desk job. Like I could totally, I need to be around people. But I live for light bulb moments also. And so it's not even like the praise that I'm looking for. It's if the kids understand the reason behind something. So like that's my extrinsic kind of. And I know that I am feeling burnt out when I don't get a lot of light bulb moments from the kids, and when like I don't see them making connections and in that kind of way. That's when I know that I'm like, all right, I need to, revamp this, ask different questions, like dig deeper for them. Yeah.
The definition that I liked a lot from the reading is it said the youth worker practitioner can be seen as a partner to youth who from their position of experience and expertise facilitates transformations in youth by improving and enriching their lives. Because the readings, it was kind of wishy-washy on the definition of like the true hard definition of a professional. They threw a bunch of quotes from a bunch of different researchers, because professional in a different area of study would be a little bit more hard, easier to define, but in this, it's understanding youth themselves is hard to define. So defining a professional in that area would be harder. But I like this because it was improving and enriching their lives. As far as intrinsic versus extrinsic motivators, I gathered from the reading that it was intrinsic, and I would also have to agree for my own personal life. I'm not going down the youth development path, but my plan is to work for the national parks to make programs available to all. So I know that in some context, I will be working in youth programs at some point, which is why I'm taking this class, even though it's not my program. And it's an intrinsic motivator for me, because I graduated undergrad. I had a career job. I was making more money than I thought I'd ever be making my first year out of college. And there was no fulfillment. There was no, I'm doing something good. It was just, I'd come home, I get a paycheck, and that's it. And even though it was a lot of money, it so much didn't fill me up inside that I was like, I need to go back, figure out what it is that I care about. And it was this. And I've had people, they question, why'd you walk away from that? Why would you go back to school for less money? I was like, because it's something that matters to me. And that's why I think that intrinsic motivation is so important to this. And we've talked about how it's not like the glamorous or high paid position, but we all care about it. And so that's why I think it's important that we show people why we care about it.
Absolutely. Number 7 is each of us will present a CRF question stem, and each member will share their thoughts on that question for each person, and the student that asked the question will answer last. Wow. Answer last. Words are hard. Okay. I'll go first. Mine is about youth in the media. Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so how can the media influence youth in a positive way instead of a negative? Because everyone always thinks it's negative. So how can it influence youth in a positive way?
Just right off the bat, what I can think of is Greta Thunberg. I don't know if I said her last name right. She was the teenager. She like dropped out of school. And she said like every day I won't go back to school until we fight like these environmental battles. And she started like a whole youth environmental, oh man, I'm blanking on the word, but like not program, but
Activism.
yeah, a sense of activism. So other kids and youth saw this young girl their age actually doing something, right? She believes in like we can save the world and environmentalism. And so I thought that was really positive. Like I was in high school when she like blew up on Twitter and we used the hashtag, and I thought that was like one positive way
Absolutely.
media can affect teenagers.
I think of like, so one of the cattle raisers that I follow on Instagram, her name is Natalie Kavarik. She has a podcast called Discover Ag, and in it they like discuss different parts of agriculture and like they try and educate their listeners on it. And I think that there's um certain media outlets like that right now, or pages specifically, that are trying really hard to use their page more so for education than maybe just for like um I don't even know the right word for it, just like attention, I guess. And so I think those people are very beneficial for the youth because they not only see that there's somebody out there trying to encourage others to learn that information, but then they're gaining the knowledge that those people are sharing.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all have seen, there's a YouTube channel it's a man that's going around and he does household chores and things like that and teaches young boys without dads how to do things around the house and
Mhm.
how to change a tire or how to check your car's oil or how to fix a toilet. And so in my undergrad, I got a certificate in social media, and social media is just a tool. Unfortunately, it's primarily used for bad, but I'm so glad you wanted to focus on the good side of it because it is a tool and we can use it for really great things for youth.
Yeah. The direction I was going with this is that like attention spans are so little now, and it's like we have to learn to work with it, right? So there's so many like recipes on TikTok, and right now we're starting like a life skills group on campus, and it's like this is what we have to work with. This is what people have on their phones. They have TikTok, they have YouTube, they have Instagram, you know, so it's like how can we use these things to help you learn things? So yes, the YouTube video is something that I referenced, and also like a bunch of recipes on TikTok and stuff. So they can see how like people post their grocery hauls and stuff at like Aldi and stuff. And so it's like if you want all these ingredients and you know that it's cheaper at this place, like that's where you should go grocery shopping. And I live in Atlanta, so there's so many things happening in Atlanta, and sometimes the news takes over like one thing and they just talk about that for 3 days, but it's like so many other things are happening. So like Twitter, Instagram, we have like ATL Scoop, which is like a news Instagram that tells like everything that's happening. Like if there's shootings, we had like 2 shootings the other day. If there's like shootings, if a bridge is on fire, like it tells you how traffic is doing that day. It's there are so many helpful things for life skills purposes that at least my kiddos need, and their attention span very, very much limits them. So that's where I was going with that question.
I can go next for the CRF question. I framed this as campers, but it could be any participant in a youth program. So how does the enjoyment of other participants affect a singular participant?
Oh, I like this one. I always say negativity spreads faster than positivity, and it's true. If one client is in a bad headspace, they're all going to be in a bad headspace. If one person has a dark cloud, it's just going to spread. And so I try to be very consistent with the amount of energy that I bring into every group, right? And if they know that I'm going to be consistent and they know I'm going to be loud and in their face and like this is how I am all the time, 100% energy all the time. And if that's consistent, then they're more likely to match that than an inconsistent emotion. Because this person can be happy one day, hate everything the next day, be super sad and crying, be super happy, right? And so to attach to the consistency rather than the wave, kind of, yeah.
That makes sense. I like that.
I
Yeah,
100% agree that, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're good. Go for it.
That campers' emotions will be dependent on each other. And I do like the antidote of that storm cloud spreading, because one kid being a jerk and having a bad day can totally derail the rest of the kids. Because for some reason in a youth context, bad emotions are perceived as cool. Like if someone's like, "Oh, I don't want to do this," and everyone's like, "Oh yeah, this," even if they want to do like, "Oh yeah, this sucks. Like I don't want to do this either." And so I like your approach of just, hounding the positivity to make sure that just like blow away those storm clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to approach it. I totally agree that, one person can affect the whole group or the other way around. And not just in the sense that like somebody could be in a bad mood, but maybe like somebody makes a comment and they maybe don't even mean for it to be intended to be rude, but that person perceives it that way and that totally ruins their experience. And then that puts them in a bad mood and then it would just, spread in that same way. Um, yeah, so that's kind of, I don't know. It's just so weird how people, can change their emotions based on what they think they've heard or how they perceive it themselves, even though that might not be what somebody else is actually intended from it.
Mhm. I agree that this can go both ways, right? You can have one person bring down the group, but I will say sometimes every now and then I was that camper that was like, I'm too cool for this. But it is so hard when everybody else is there like jumping around and having a good time and being goofy. It is hard not to buy into that.
Mm.
And so I've found being on the other end of it, just staying goofy, staying high energy, and you break them down after a while. They
Yeah.
eventually do buy in.
Okay, my question was an anecdotal question, so I did what is an example of how a camp impacted you in your youth?
Mm.
Could you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. What is an example of how a camp impacted you in your youth?
Um, I'll go first. I'm a youngest child, and my brother and sister that are older than me both got swim lessons at like our local YMCA. And my mom will always say she has no idea how I can swim. She has absolutely no idea. And I'm like a lifeguard. I've been a lifeguard for like 12 years. I am like a lifeguard instructor. I teach people how to be lifeguard. Like the pool is my jam. Like I love aquatic therapy. Like I love the pool. I love the ocean. I love everything. I love swimming. And my mom will always say she has no idea how I learned to swim, and it's because I went to camp. That's how I learned how to swim. That's how I learned. I put myself into like long distance swimming because like we could sign up for anything that we wanted basically. And so I put myself in like the long distance swimming group, and I was like, yeah, I can do that for sure. So yeah, that's the biggest thing. I think that's the only thing that came to my head.
I think for me, so I had a baseball camp when I was younger, and my parents they put me in my or they wanted me and my brother to be in private school until we got to college, and so being able to go to a public school's baseball camp was huge because like finally some social interaction that's different than the people that I've known for my entire life, and I got to ride there with one of my neighbors, and he was older, and he was like, "Oh, like this is so cool! Like I finally get to be out of the house." And they had fun incentives like if you did well, you got baseball cards, and I got to make a ton of friends there. And it was, I ended up playing baseball for 10 years later after that. And it was kind of one of my intros to baseball, but I enjoyed the experience so much that it became one of my primary sports.
Um, I went to a youth military leadership camp all through high school that took um, kids of military members from across the United States and flew them to a camp for free and like it was all paid for and stuff. And like they went over like leadership skills plus like just outdoor stuff. Um, one of the biggest things I took away from that is how to be like more social because I'm pretty naturally shy. Um, but I'm not going to go to a camp where like nobody knows anybody because we're all from across the United States and not talk to anybody, right? So I always made it a mission right when I got to the airport to try to like make a friend, right? Because then once I make one friend, then I can don't have to be as social, because now you have a friend. But I really feel like now, almost in any situation, I can find somebody and build a relationship with them. And I feel like I really needed that because I love talking, but like it takes me a while to actually open up to people.
Yeah, I relate to that. When I came for my new student conference, I always liked the saying that like when you go new places, nobody knows who you are, so you can be whoever you want to be. So when I went to my new student conference, I decided that I was just gonna like make a bunch of friends, so that way I like had all of these different people that I could go do things with, because I didn't go to fish camp or anything. So that was like my way of getting to know people here. So like the first day of new student conference, I like had 4 different girls that I became friends with, and like was like, okay, I'm gonna hang out with all of these people. And then I think I maybe talked to them for like 2 weeks after that. But it was the initial intention there with that. Uh my camp that I talk about is FFA. All of my examples are always FFA. I was an area officer, so when I went to the state leadership convention, I got to meet a lot of important people in the agriculture industry, and that was just really fun because it helped me kind of like help work on my public speaking and networking skills. And one of my now best friends and one of my college roommates was also an area officer, and I thought it was just, really cool how we got put together despite living completely across the state from each other. And because of the camp that we attended together, we became best friends.
Okay, well, my question is, how does resilience affect youth long-term success?
I think that's a really good one. I know my parents raised me that they were like, you can't, if you're going to do something, you can't give up, you have to continue on. And I think that's so important, because if you get into the mindset of that, if you don't want to do something anymore, you can just quit. It becomes so easy to become unreliable in the future, and not only to other people, but to yourself. Like personally, I don't really know how I would be able to have like confidence in myself that I actually truly could accomplish something if a lot of things that I had pursued as a child or in my youth, I decided that I was going to quit halfway through. So that's just my opinion.
I realized when you're talking, I teach my kids resilience from a completely different way. Because you're saying, like, yeah, like, don't give up, don't quit. And mine is like, so many things have happened to you that have been out of your control, and you're still alive. Like that's what my brain was doing. Like I teach my kids resilience is a rubber band, and like no matter how much you're stretched or whatever, it's still protected by the outside layer, and like this one's broken, and so it's like it could be broken, but it'll find around its like same shape. And so like so many things have happened to you and you got stretched so much. But it's really like you're still here, you're still going, you're still able. And that's really what I teach like my kids. But that's like, trauma informed lens from behavioral health. So
yeah. My brain, I went the same way as you, Grace. Speaking of like Glennon Doyle, they talk a lot about resilience. And the other way where, man, you just survived. Like, and sometimes it can suck saying, well, you're so much stronger because of it. It's like, well, I don't want to be stronger because of something terrible.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you can you did survive it, right? And you are stronger in certain ways. And I guess just taking that knowledge of when it sucks, but you will survive, and that's okay. And I feel like that just sometimes life sucks and you'll get through it. You can get through it.
The answer I had, so one related to the chapter, was it said when resilience is paired with proactive factors such as positive adult relationships, it is a extreme determinant for a youth's future success. And I resonate 100% with all the things you guys are saying. It's like something that I do in my own life is when a situation sucks and it really sucks, and you're like, I feel like I'm never going to get through this. I think back, I'm like, I've thought this before, and it always ended. Like it might not have ended in a day, might have ended in a week, might not have ended in a month, but it always came to an end. It's like the saying, like, and this too shall pass. Like at some point it's going to be done and I'll be better for it in some way. But I think the key indicator the chapter had was that you need to also pair it with someone who's teaching. Like you're both teaching, all three of you are teaching youth. So a youth that's going through resilience, also having a good teacher is what prepares them for success, because we all had good teachers that taught us those lessons, but a youth on their own doesn't think, oh, I'll be better for this. You know, they're just like, this sucks.
Absolutely.
Okay. Is it my turn to read the question again?
I think so.
I just did number
Okay.
7, so yeah.
Okay. Okay. So question number 8 is, what are the features of warm and emotionally supportive relationships? So the one thing that I had that I really thought was important, that's like positive regard or warm acceptance without conditions communicates to young people that they are of worth and that their thoughts, feelings, opinions, and ideas matter. And so I know that that's not really a specific thing that we need to focus on, but I think that's like the most important thing in my opinion, because being a youth, it's so important to feel that way, to feel validated in whatever you're going through. And I sometimes I think it's really difficult for you to find somebody like that. I know, like, when I was growing up, Instagram was such a big thing, and all of my friends, they would just post to post like almost every day, having, a bunch of followers, and it was all about how many likes you could get. So then if you weren't one of those people, then it kind of felt like you weren't um cool or whatever. But then being able to go hang out with somebody who made you feel safe and validated really was like that warm and emotionally supportive relationship that made you feel like it didn't really matter that you weren't doing those things, you were still going to be fine the way you were.
I think it also goes back to what Jacob was saying with the unconditional regard, like showing up for people as they need. Yeah. And just as you can, and being there. Yeah. Validation, being there. Like an ear, a shoulder, a hug, yeah. And the willingness, also willingness, yeah, to consistently show up.
Consistency, that's one of the two things that the chapter pointed out that like super resonated with me, are consistency and predictability. It's like, it's not, there's a reason why it was called storms and troubles that they used to call youth, because that's what it is. I mean, when you're a kid, you've got hormones going over the place. You're trying to find out who you are in this world. You're trying to find your social standing. You think that social standing matters. Everything is all crazy. And if you can have somebody who's consistent and predictable, and you don't have to think or worry about how they're going to act, I know that my youth programmer is always going to be happy to see me. I know they're always going to give me a hug, and I know they're always going to teach me something. And I don't have to worry or even spend any extra time outside of my program stressing on my way there in the car about, okay, well, what's going to happen today? Because I know blank is going to be there, and blank always does the exact same things.
I had the same thing written down. Being consistent and predictable is super important. We growing up like to think that we don't like boundaries, but like boundaries and rules are really important for all of us. And being consistent, like our parents setting rules or teachers setting rules, and then following through is really important. My husband and I were actually just talking about how it's important. Like, I know my parents, if I ask them to, are gonna always show up for me, right? I can rely, hey, this is important for me. And they're gonna say, all right, we'll do whatever we can to be there, which was really good for me growing up. As a teacher, I tried to be predictable, right? All my classes, they know, all right, we can't sit on the floor. I don't know why kids want to sit on the floor, but they can in other teachers' classes. But nope, in mine, no matter what, whoever's here, you can't sit on the floor. And just being consistent with that rule and following through on what's the word? I'm blanking. Repercussions is important.
Around to the next question?
Yeah.
Okay. Which behavioral scientist is mentioned with the zone of proximal development? Sorry, if you see things flying around my room, it's all the daddy long legs. Like, I know I keep looking around and grabbing the air. I'm actually grabbing bugs and throwing them down.
Oh, God.
Why do you think this is important? Do you have examples of developmental processes when you were younger? So I'm not even going to try and pronounce this. It's Vygottsky.
Yep.
Yeah, that's homie said some stuff. He talked about how when you're in proximity to an adult or peers that are more capable than you will learn and adapt to them. You'll basically rise up to the occasion. And my example of this was I had a predisposition for math, but I didn't really care enough to try more in high school. And my cross country coach dueled as our trigonometry and calculus teacher. And on our like 10-mile long run days, she would just chat with me about math the entire run. And I just thought we were talking to fill the time. She was being sneaky and getting me more interested in actually teaching me things about the subject outside of the classroom. And I ended up being, compared to the rest of my peers, I was an average student. I made over 100 in math, and I ended up tutoring the entire class. It was only 20 kids, so it wasn't that big of a class. But I ended up tutoring the entire class because she spent the extra time outside of the classroom to push me to her level of education.
It's kind of different, but similar. I played piano growing up, and I used to, sit and practice while my mom was cooking, and I would get so frustrated during a piece because of whatever reason. But I would notice that if like my mom or dad happened to be in the room with me, right, so just sitting there, knowing that they're just kind of expecting more of me would make me focus harder and actually like try to get through the piece more because I know I was like in some way they're listening and they don't want to hear me just like slamming on keys because that's what I do when I get frustrated. And I just when we got to that question, I was like, oh yeah, I consistently play better having a parent in the room than when I played by myself.
I thought of I forget what it's called, but there's a whole body doubling.
Mm-hmm.
Body doubling. There's a whole like I don't know if it's everywhere. I don't know if it's in Texas, but in Atlanta, you can like pay people to just come to your house and sit while you like fold your clothes because having someone else there is like the support that you need in order to get a task done. So like instead of a TaskRabbit coming to your house and like hanging something for you, it's literally someone that comes to your house and like is just in the same proximity as you do a task. And it's like super good for like people with depression and people with anxiety because they don't want to do a task or they hype themselves up so much and then they end up not doing the task. So body doubling is super is exactly what I thought of for this. And I know for like in my high school years, this would not have worked for me at all because I was such a social anxious butterfly that I needed to fill the silence with speaking all the time. But in college and now as an adult, body doubling is super cool. And like I realized that it works for me. Like my roommate cannot go to bed before me if I have something to do. She needs to also be there. And it's very real. And the same thing for her. She's also a therapist, so we understand and we just sit while the other person does their thing and it's okay.
Yeah, that's relatable. When I study for exams, I always have to make my boyfriend sit up with me because as soon as he goes to bed, then I just like totally lose all track of what I'm doing. Yeah. My example was about showing goats. So like the developmental process, I guess, that I identified was that like when we first purchase our goats, if we like have to start training them to walk on a halter, it's like really difficult because they don't want to walk. But then the more that you do that, then they understand that they can walk with it and it's safe. And then you move on to showing them, and you work on these different steps. And I think it's kind of like relatable to things that like I did in my youth. So first, like I have to think of like a specific example for volleyball. My mom was a big volleyball player when she was in high school, so she really wanted me to be good at volleyball. So I started playing when I was like 8 years old in YMCA. I was the first one in middle. Oh my God.
I'm telling y'all.
I was the first one who learned to serve overhand, which was a big deal, I guess. But it was just a step-by-step thing. She would stay outside with me and we would practice, and it would be like, okay, if you do this 10 times, then we can be done for the day. And it was like the repetition and being able to just work through it with her and try and get that frustration out in that setting helped me succeed in the gym where I maybe wasn't the sole focus of the coach because there were other people there.
Mhm.
Going on to question 10, what progress have you made with your final project and program activity assignments? So honestly, I haven't made a lot of progress yet, but my niece has spring break next week, and so she'll be hanging out with us. So I'm hoping that she'll be able to like be with my son during the day a little bit, and I can get some work done. But I did figure out what my themes were for the project activity, which it's kind of, I feel like a win, and came up with some ideas. So one of my themes is strategies for recognizing and promoting positive behaviors. So I don't know quite what to do with it. I'm thinking kind of about maybe making a skit or having people make skits for recognizing positive behaviors. And then my other theme is team building activities for junior high and youth school and high school youth. And I really enjoyed this one activity where it's a blind obstacle course where you have to like be led. So that's kind of where I'm thinking for that. And then for my final project idea, all I know is I'm doing the three-day overnight thing. So I don't know much else about that one.
My battery's about to die. I'm gonna run into the other room and get the charger. I will be right back.
I'm on the same track as you right now, where spring break is in a week, and I've had it on my calendar since group 1. I'll work on these during spring break because this class has been more of a time commitment than I realized it was going to be. So I know what I want to do for my overnight. I'm going to take a camp that I went to when I was a kid that wasn't an overnight camp and turn it into an overnight camp and kind of base it on that. As far as my program activity assignments, I know my themes. I'm not going to lie, I haven't started on those at all. My plan is to just get all 10 of them done during spring break. Same with my icebreaker games, which I know is the next question.
I'm very jealous of y'all. Yeah, when I like first signed up for this class, I was like, oh, that's good. I can do it in like my spare time for my internship. And now I'm like, I don't know how I'm gonna be able to get
What
all
spare
this done
time?
and do my internship at the same time. But I do have an idea for my final project. I think I'm gonna kind of base it on the livestock ambassador program through the 4-H because I did that when I was in high school. And so it's like a 3-day thing where we tour a bunch of different agricultural industry type situations here in College Station, and then you also get to visit A&M and kind of look at like Rosenthal Meat Center and things like that. So I think I'll do something like that probably. And then my program activities, I have not started working on projects for them for. The one of them I have a pretty good idea of like at least a couple of the things I want to do, but my other one is quiet indoor rainy day activities for large groups. And I'm struggling with that one because when it's rainy day, I just want to sit on the couch and watch movies. So I'm trying to think of things that don't include sitting on the couch and watching movies.
Mhm.
Quiet is key there. 'Cause I'm like, oh,
Yeah, quiet indoor activities on rainy days. That sounds sleepy.
Yeah.
Sounds sleepy. Yeah, I have started looking at it. I haven't made much progress. I'm not gonna be on it. I'm not gonna lie. And for my like icebreaker games, I know that's the next question, but I asked my job permission if I could get the kids' backs recorded for the videos and stuff. Because we can't have like faces or names or anything, but maybe I can show their feet doing something. Yeah, because I'm trying to make it easier on myself and use what I have. Yeah. Oh, question 11 is, do you have participants for your icebreaker games? If not, how can you get them? Have you reached out to your classmates? Did Dr. Nelson put too many questions in this question?
Mhm.
Yes. Yep, icebreaker games. I asked my work permission to use my children.
I told my roommates I'd buy them beer if they would participate. Because I don't know anyone else here. I moved.
Yeah,
I've
if
been
I can't use my
wandering.
kids, I'm making my employees do it. So I am a manager. I can make them do that.
Jacob, where did you say you moved from?
So I did undergrad here, but then me and all my friends graduated, and I moved to Dallas, and so I'm gonna try and see if I can get one of them done during spring break, like when I go home, and just get my friends from back home. But I moved back here, and everyone that I knew had graduated.
Well, I'm in Bryan, so if you need help, let me know.
Me too. Let me know if you need somebody to participate in your.
My husband does game nights every Friday, or like card nights. So you can also come up on a Friday because I'm using all his friends for these activities.
Nice.
They're in my house anyway, so
I think I'm gonna ask my coworkers. I have not asked them yet. But that's probably my best option because they're the only people that I'm gonna be seeing for the next 20 days. So
that's smart.
okay.
That'll be a good break.
The final question is, what is Dr. Nelson's office phone number and when is a good time to call him? Do you think he would chat about my assignments, projects, icebreakers? And he answered that one. He said, yes, he will. His phone number I got from his syllabus. It's 979-845-9781. And his office hours are Monday from 12 to 1. I'm sure he would be willing to talk to you outside of that if you scheduled an appointment with him or emailed him, but that is what is listed on the syllabus.
You can also text him.
Yeah,
He responds to text.
there you go.
That's his personal number?
I don't know.
I would not
I
be
think
giving out
so.
my
It's
personal
his
number to
cell phone.
students.
I don't know. I have his number.
Oh goodness.
question-
I had to call him.
His
I had
office
to call
phone
him
number?
at the beginning of the semester to like go over my degree plan.
Oh,
Yeah.
is he your chairperson?
Yeah.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah. And he has texted me. So I know that he'll text you too.
Nice. Well, we all know that who he can blame if he gets a bunch of texts from a student.
I'm so sorry in advance, Dr. Nelson. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that concludes our meeting.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yeah.
Fun. Do we have another? This is our last group discussion, right?
I don't know. I'm trying to look right now.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Because what we would discuss in group 3.
I'm gonna stop recording.